Hello and welcome to the Northwest Treatment Vidcast.
Hello, everybody. Today we get to talk about support groups.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about how support groups can be helpful in many different ways and how we at Northwest Treatment do have support groups highly encouraged, if not required, for people struggling with mental health and addiction.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to start with the types of different support groups because it makes the most sense in my head. And
Sure.
that is, you've got support groups for addiction, you've got support groups for physical illnesses, you've got support groups for mental illnesses, divorce, grief, family support. You have them for your sewing groups, sometimes can be a support group, knitting groups, any of those things. So really we can find support groups in most aspects of our lives.
Right. And the idea behind a support group is some kind of group of people, which can really be two people or more. Some of them are hundreds of people big, depends on the venue and what's going on. But they're regularly scheduled meetings where people come together because they have something in common. They have or are dealing with, a problem in their life or a transition. Like you mentioned, it could be a divorce support group. Dealing with the legalities of it or the emotional part of it. Could be
Mm-hmm.
addiction groups, which is mental health and addiction groups are the ones that we're the most knowledgeable about, I would say.
For sure. And so within the addiction world, you have all the anonymouses. So
Right.
Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Heroin's Anonymous, CMA, which is Crystal Meth Anonymous, Marijuana's Anonymous, Sex Anonymous, Codependency, and the
It,
list is
it goes on.
endless,
And
which
AA has
is,
been around a long time.
yes. And it's actually kind of a wonderful thing that there are that many of them for that many specific things. Because I definitely have
Right.
heard it from clients before where they love AA, but they don't want to go to NA, or they don't like it, or they like NA, but they don't want to go to AA. Like, I'm not
Correct.
making judgments on any of them. I think they're all great and wonderful in their own personal ways. As long as you find something that works for you.
Right. And one of the things to note about specifically Alcoholics Anonymous AA is they have different structures of groups, even under the AA banner. So
Yes.
they have different ones where it's a get together and listen to a specific story or speaker, and that's a speaker meeting. They have ones that are gendered specific, so that if you want to talk about men's issues or women's issues, they talk about ones that are family based. So there's a lot of other issues in there.
And that actually tends to hold true with most recovery groups I've ever
True.
seen. Um, and so then there's also Al-Anon. But Al-Anon is for the friends and family of those that are affected by alcoholism.
Right. And some people I know will go to both. They'll go to
Yeah,
AA for themselves to deal with their addiction, and then they'll go to Al-Anon to deal with the fact that maybe their parent was an addict.
exactly. Then you've got Smart Recovery, which is self-management, addiction recovery training, I believe.
Yes.
And they are a little bit more, well, it's
Science and logic
self-managed.
based.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's in the title, self-management.
Yeah.
They work really well, actually. For folks who don't tend to do as well with like AA groups, I tend to find that they do pretty well with Smart Recovery groups. Then there's also Dharma Recovery, which used to be called Refuge Recovery.
Right.
Those two groups have now splintered off.
Correct.
And that one is more of a Buddhist bent on the 12 steps.
Meditation and such.
Exactly. Their meetings tend to be a lot more meditation based and whatnot, but they also do have a Buddhist element
They
to
do.
their recovery process.
Right.
On the other end of on the other side of it, you also have Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christ-based recovery
Yes.
program. They've been around as long as they've been around longer than I've been in the field. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
they've definitely been around a lot longer. They also are great for connecting like actual Bible quotes to various issues going on.
Absolutely. And then we've got Adult Children of Alcoholics. And those are for those of us that grew up with our parents as alcoholics and didn't really know what was going on. And now we are here as adults and we don't know what's going on. And we're trying to figure out what to do with ourselves.
Right. Right.
And so the majority of these groups, I would say, now have moved to an online presence where you are able to make sure that you can go to your groups with it. And I've had mixed reviews from our clients about some of them really like it and some of them are having a really hard time with it.
Right.
Uh,
So one of the interesting things about COVID happening and all the online attendance is some people have really blossomed by being able to do support groups whenever they want to in the middle of the night with their work schedule, from home or from their car, or even drop in on some that are international and actually
mhm.
see some differences there. But there's also been a lot of struggles. We've had clients who have not found it as fulfilling.
I would say that there's definitely a generational gap there. Like my younger clients tend to do a little bit better with it. Those of us that are, you know, well versed in technology type things.
Sure. Or even have the technology you would need, or a good enough quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there, I mean, like it kind of goes back and forth with it. And again, there are some groups though that are still meeting in person in Oregon. They're just making sure that they're meeting at, like, I think the client I was talking to said that they had 5 to 6 people, and they all wear masks and they all sit in the really broad circle outside to try to be as safe as they possibly can. There's some big benefits to going to support groups, which include like not feeling alone.
Right. Benefits include, like you said, not being alone, being able to express your own feelings and have people that you're pretty sure will have a better understanding than maybe your friends or family or coworkers, reducing the distress and the stress that we're dealing with it.
Mm-hmm. Hope is a big one, because a lot of times in the meetings you get to finally see people that have made it out, or that have kind of like a lot of the big things that happen in NA and AA is like, find the person that has what you want and talk to them.
Right.
And so a lot of times it's super helpful to see people that have like 10, 15, 20 years clean, and they're doing really well. Like they're back with their families, and they have families of their own now, and they have all these different things.
Right. That's really important.
It is. It's vital. And it can also reduce your stress personally, like your distress about what you're doing. And all of the anonymous and all of the meetings that we have mentioned, specifically recovery meetings, have some kind of self-understanding process work, whether it's step work when you're talking about the anonymous, whether it is, I can't remember what Smart Recovery calls them, but it's the same kind of principle of like self-reflection work on how to be who you want to be.
Right. To get you to your best self. And you can do that either on your own, or you can do it with mentors or peers, and having a sponsor. So there's different ways that they try to accommodate everybody coming in the door.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I always want to talk to people is like, if you're going to get a sponsor, you start to being in groups, you might have some questions, and you might have some questions to ask them. And so one of the big ones is confidentiality.
Right.
What is said in those rooms stays in those rooms.
Right.
Specific conditions. Some of the meetings are women-based.
Right.
Some of the meetings are men-based. Some meetings are LGBTQIA-based. Some meetings are open to everybody. Some meetings are not. Some meetings are closed, actually, and you have to contact the moderator before you can even go there.
And a lot of it is also location based. If you're someone who's going to show up in person and you do want to do this regularly, is it a scheduled time, location that you can make work? Especially if you're talking about people going through with a DUI who don't have a license, that stuff can be more complicated for you.
And generally speaking, all of the meetings will tell you what the ground rules are at the very beginning. With AA meetings, it is part of the process when they open them up, is how to have the meetings.
Right. And most of these support groups do also have websites, which are really easy to find and have some really good basic info for you.
And all of it is mostly free. And it's probably one of the very few places I've ever been in my life where when they say it's free, but donations are accepted, they actually mean that. Like they will not look at you weird if you do not give money into the group generally.
Nope.
Most of those meetings are going to be self-supported. You shouldn't be paying anything it's like I said, donations are always welcome, but you will not be looked at sideways if you're not giving money.
Right.
Which is one of the things I also want to point out. Some warning signs about support groups.
Yeah.
The difference between a support group and a therapy group are 2 things. One, support groups are lay folks, and therapy groups are led by people like me and Jessica who are licensed.
Correct.
First differential. The second thing is that support groups tend to be free, and therapy groups tend to not be free.
Correct.
Because it takes one of us to be able to go through it. So a warning sign, I'm always a little bit weary of this, is when I hear folks going in and they're paying for quote unquote a self-help group.
Yeah, that's not always the greatest sign.
It's a therapy group at that point, and I'm fine with it, but call it like it is, really. And the other part of it is like, if they promise you a cure, be wary.
Yeah, it's one thing to say, this has worked for me, let me share with you, versus here is how to cure your fill in the blank.
Yeah, that concerns me.
That's scary. You can also have disruptive members, but That happens almost everywhere. It's a matter of how they're handled. If they're allowed to take the meeting off into the crazy wilderness, and nobody steps up to kind of shut that down, that can be a problem. You might not want to go there a lot. It's also sometimes a situation where people can be very judgmental. You're always going to have interesting and new people come into those rooms. So you never know who you're going to get. It's the whole width and breadth of humanity. So you're going to have some members in there that are going to be a little judgy. We can even be judgy when we walk
Absolutely.
in there. It's your hope is that the people in charge are not judging of what you're doing and where you're coming from. And, or if you share, you don't want people judging you back because you just shared.
Exactly.
Those are some of the, be more aware of, take yourself out of that space, find a new group. Sometimes it takes a while to find a good group, much like to find a good therapist. Don't always pick your first one unless you love them.
Exactly. And that's actually the other thing I was going to say is that if that group doesn't work for you, that's fine. There are so many groups out there. Do not feel bad. It's
Right.
like a pair of shoes. If it doesn't fit, go on to the next pair of shoes and we will find you one that fits for you.
Right.
The other thing to look out for is if you have a person that is telling you to stop your treatment.
Right. There's definitely some places that will either say, stop whatever court-based treatment you're doing, or they will say, here's a better one for you, or like pressure you one way or the other. It's one thing to say, this worked for me, kind of like similarly like we talked about with promises of care. But if they're pressuring you to stop any court-mandated treatment or medical treatment, that's really a worry.
Absolutely. So we hope that this has been helpful for you in finding your own support groups. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments or anything else and we can help you with. And with that, we wish you to be well and to be healthy.
See you guys.